If you ever find yourself on a freight train after midnight and receive a radio message from a station that no longer exists, do not answer it, because what happened to 3 railroad workers in the Appalachian Mountains during the winter of 2017 was never officially explained. The railroad company called it a communication failure. The local police called it exhaustion and hallucinations. But the 3 men who survived that night knew the truth. Something was waiting beside those tracks. Something that should have stayed buried. My name is Mason Walker, and at the time, I had been working as a freight train engineer for nearly 12 years. I thought I had seen everything. Storms, landslides, broken tracks, runaway wildlife. Nothing scared me anymore. At least, that's what I believed until that night. It was just after 11 p.m. when our freight train entered a remote section of the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. The train was carrying construction equipment and steel containers. With me in the locomotive was my assistant engineer, Ryan Cooper. At the very rear of the train was our conductor, Daniel Brooks, riding alone inside the maintenance caboose. Outside, freezing fog covered the mountains. The forest on both sides of the tracks looked endless. Not a single house, not a single light, just darkness. The kind of darkness that feels alive. For hours everything had been normal. Then the radio suddenly crackled. A burst of static filled the cab. Ryan looked at me. Neither of us had touched the radio. The static grew louder. Then a voice came through. Freight 407, stop immediately. Track ahead is unsafe. Move to Hollow Creek siding and wait for further instructions. I grabbed the microphone. This is Freight 407. Identify your station. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then the same voice replied, Hollow Creek Station. A cold feeling ran through my chest, because Hollow Creek Station had been abandoned more than 30 years ago. And according to every railroad map I had ever seen, it no longer existed. Ryan slowly turned toward me. His face had gone pale. Did he just say Hollow Creek? I nodded. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then, through the fog ahead, we saw something that made my hands tighten around the controls. A green signal, glowing in the darkness, directly beside an old siding that wasn't supposed to be there. I should have ignored the signal. I should have stayed on the main track and contacted Central Dispatch again. But railroad rules are strict. A green signal means proceed. So I carefully reduced speed and guided the freight train onto the siding. The rails looked old, very old. Rust covered most of the track. Tall weeds pushed through the wooden ties. It looked like no train had passed there in decades. Yet somehow the switch had moved perfectly, as if it had been waiting for us. The moment the last freight car cleared the main line, something strange happened. The green signal vanished. Not turned off. Vanished. 1 second it was there. The next second it was gone. Ryan immediately stood up. You saw that, right? Yeah. That is impossible. I didn't answer, because deep down, I was thinking the same thing. A few moments later, Daniel's voice came through the radio from the rear caboose. Mason, where are we? What do you mean? I checked my GPS. It says we're in the middle of nowhere. Probably a signal issue. No, Daniel replied. His voice sounded nervous. There's something wrong. My GPS just disappeared. The radio went silent. Ryan looked out the side window. The fog had become thicker. The trees surrounding the train were barely visible. Even the moonlight seemed unable to penetrate the darkness. For the next hour, we waited. No radio updates. No passing trains. No sounds. Nothing. It felt as if the entire world had disappeared. Then, just after midnight, Daniel called again. This time his voice was shaking. Mason, what happened? I think somebody is outside. Ryan and I exchanged a glance. Outside where? Near the last car. My grip tightened around the radio. Can you see them? For several seconds, Daniel didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I can't see a face. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? The answer came immediately. Because whoever it is isn't moving. And they've been standing in the same spot for 20 minutes. Ryan and I sat frozen inside the locomotive. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The only sound was the low hum of the engine. Then I grabbed the radio again. Daniel, lock your door. It's already locked. Keep your flashlight on him. Another pause. Then Daniel answered. I am. What is he doing? Nothing. The fear in his voice was getting worse. He's just standing there. I looked at Ryan. Neither of us wanted to say what we were both thinking. People don't stand motionless in freezing temperatures for 20 minutes. Not without moving. Not without reacting. Not without a reason. Suddenly Daniel spoke again. Mason. What? He's closer. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean closer? I looked away for maybe 2 seconds. His breathing became heavier. When I looked back, he was about 30 feet nearer. Ryan immediately grabbed the radio. Daniel, get away from the windows. The reply came instantly. I already did. Then silence. Complete silence. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. 30 seconds. Finally I heard Daniel whisper, "Oh God." The words barely came out. What happened? I asked. No answer. Daniel? Still nothing. Then the radio exploded with static. A loud burst of noise filled the cab. Ryan pulled the speaker away from his ear. The static continued for several seconds before suddenly stopping. And then we heard something else. Footsteps. Slow footsteps. Coming through Daniel's radio. Crunch. 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 Like someone walking over gravel. The sound continued. Steady. Slow. Getting closer. Neither Ryan nor I moved. Neither of us breathed. Then Daniel finally spoke again. But something was wrong. Very wrong. His voice sounded distant. Almost hollow. Like he was speaking from the bottom of a tunnel. He's at the door. The footsteps stopped. At that exact moment, every light inside the locomotive flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. Then darkness swallowed the entire train. The engine was still running, but every light had gone out. And from somewhere outside in the fog, a loud metallic bang echoed through the night. It sounded like someone had just struck one of the freight cars with tremendous force. For a moment, neither Ryan nor I moved. The cab was completely dark. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like a living wall. Then another metallic crash echoed through the train. This one was closer, much closer. It sounded as if something had slammed directly into one of the freight cars. Ryan grabbed a flashlight and switched it on. The narrow beam cut through the darkness. My radio suddenly crackled. Mason. It was Daniel, but he sounded terrified. What happened? I asked. I can hear someone walking on top of the train. Ryan immediately looked up. The roof above us was silent. Then we heard it too. A heavy thump, followed by another. Then another. Something was moving across the freight cars. Step, step, step. The sound traveled slowly along the train. From the rear, toward us. Daniel's breathing became faster. It's coming this way. I checked the side window. Nothing. Only fog. The footsteps continued. Steady. Deliberate. As if whatever was out there wasn't in a hurry. It knew exactly where we were. Suddenly Daniel shouted, "Oh God." The radio exploded with static again. Daniel. No response. Daniel. Answer me. More static. Then silence. My stomach dropped. Ryan immediately reached for his jacket. What are you doing? We can't leave him back there. I didn't want to go outside. Every instinct in my body was telling me to stay inside the locomotive. But Daniel was alone. If something had happened to him, we couldn't just sit there. We grabbed our flashlights and climbed down from the locomotive. The cold hit us immediately. It felt far colder than it should have. Our breath turned white in the air. The fog swallowed almost everything beyond a few yards. The freight cars stretched behind us like a black metal wall disappearing into the darkness. For several seconds we stood still, listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. No movement. Then Ryan pointed his flashlight toward the gravel beside the tracks. Mason. I followed the beam, and my blood ran cold. There were footprints. Large footprints. Fresh footprints. Running alongside the train. The strange thing was that they appeared only on one side. There were no matching prints leading away. No return tracks. Just a single trail moving toward the rear caboose, as if someone had walked out of the darkness itself, and then vanished. Ryan and I followed the footprints. Neither of us said a word. The beam from our flashlights shook slightly in our hands. The further we walked, the quieter the forest became. Even the wind had stopped. It felt unnatural, as if the entire mountain was holding its breath. The footprints continued beside the train for several more cars. Then they suddenly ended. Just ended. No turn. No second set of tracks. Nothing. The last footprint was pressed deep into the gravel. Beyond it was untouched ground. Ryan stared at it. That's impossible. I couldn't disagree. A person couldn't simply disappear. Yet that was exactly what it looked like. Then we heard something. A faint sound from farther down the train. A metallic scrape. Very soft. Very distant. Coming from the direction of the caboose. We immediately started moving faster. 1 freight car. 2 freight cars. 3. The fog became thicker with every step. Soon we could barely see beyond the next car. Then Daniel's caboose finally appeared. The small cabin stood motionless at the very end of the train. Its single exterior light was still glowing, but the door was open, wide open. Ryan froze. My stomach tightened. We had specifically told Daniel to keep it locked. I called his name. No answer, only silence. We climbed the metal steps and shined our flashlights inside. The room was empty. Daniel was gone. His flashlight lay on the floor. The radio was still sitting on the table. The chair had been knocked over, but there was no sign of Daniel. No blood, no struggle, no explanation. Ryan slowly stepped inside. Then his flashlight landed on something near the back wall. Both of us immediately stopped breathing. Written across the wall were 4 words. Not painted, not carved, written in fresh mud. You should not have stopped. A cold wave passed through my entire body. Ryan backed away from the wall. What the hell is this? Before I could answer, Daniel's radio suddenly came to life. The speaker crackled. Then a voice emerged. A voice that sounded exactly like Daniel. Mason. Ryan and I stared at the radio. Mason, help me. The voice sounded weak, terrified, as if you were somewhere very far away. Then came a sentence that made every hair on my body stand up. I'm not in the caboose anymore. For a second, neither Ryan nor I moved. The voice coming from the radio was unmistakable. It was Daniel. The same voice, the same tone, the same fear. Yet the caboose was empty. Mason, please help me. The radio crackled again. Where are you? I shouted. A few seconds passed before the answer came. I don't know. His voice sounded weak, like he was struggling to breathe. It's dark. Ryan grabbed the radio. Daniel, are you outside? No. Then where are you? The reply sent a chill through both of us. I think I'm underneath the train. Ryan and I immediately looked at each other. That made no sense. We had just walked the entire length of the train. There was nobody underneath it. Then Daniel spoke again. No. A pause. His breathing grew faster. Not underneath. Another pause. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. Something brought me somewhere else. The radio suddenly filled with static. Behind the static, I thought I heard something. More voices. Dozens of voices. Whispering together. Ryan heard them too. His face went pale. Then the transmission cut off. Silence returned. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then a distant light appeared through the fog. A single yellow light, far beyond the tracks, moving slowly between the trees. Ryan noticed it first. Mason. I turned. The light was definitely moving. At first it looked like a lantern, but as it came closer, we realized someone was carrying it. A tall figure, walking between the trees, heading toward the train. My heart started pounding. The figure never rushed, never stumbled. It simply kept walking, step by step, closer, closer, closer. Then the lantern suddenly stopped. The person holding it was now standing at the edge of the forest, watching us. Neither Ryan nor I could see its face. The fog hid everything above its shoulders. Only the lantern remained visible, swinging gently, back and forth, back and forth. Then Daniel's radio came alive one final time. The voice that came through was no longer his. It was deeper, older, and completely emotionless. You were warned not to stop here. The lantern immediately went out, and the entire forest around the train erupted with footsteps. The sound came from every direction at once. Footsteps, hundreds of them, running through the forest, circling the train, closing in. Ryan grabbed my arm. We need to get back to the locomotive now. I didn't argue. We jumped down from the caboose and started running along the train. The footsteps followed, sometimes beside us, sometimes behind us. Sometimes impossibly close, yet whenever we turned our flashlights toward the trees, we saw nothing. Only fog, only darkness, only shadows. Then something appeared ahead. At first I thought it was another freight car, but it wasn't. A person was standing on the tracks, perfectly still, waiting. Ryan's flashlight hit the figure. Neither of us spoke. It was wearing an old railroad uniform, the kind that hadn't been used in decades. The coat was torn, mud covered the sleeves, and resting on its head was a faded engineer's cap. The figure slowly lifted its head. Its face was impossible to see, not because of the darkness, Because there was no face, just a black empty void beneath the cap. Ryan stumbled backward. The figure took a single step forward, then another, then another. The footsteps in the forest immediately stopped. Every sound vanished, as if everything was waiting, watching. The faceless railroad worker raised one arm and pointed toward the trees. For a moment nothing happened. Then shapes began appearing between the trunks, dozens of them, men, women, children, all standing motionless, all staring toward the train. None of them moved, none of them blinked. Ryan's voice barely worked. What are they? I didn't answer, because deep down I already knew. Those weren't people. Then something moved among them. A tall shadow stepped forward from the darkness, much taller than the others. Its body seemed wrong. Its arms hung far too low, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and in its hand was the same lantern we had seen earlier. The yellow light flickered back to life. The moment it did, every figure in the forest began walking toward us. Not running, walking, slowly, silently, and no matter how fast we backed away, they kept getting closer. Ryan and I backed away until our legs hit the side of a freight car. There was nowhere left to go. The figures kept approaching, slow, silent, relentless. The lantern's yellow glow illuminated dozens of pale faces emerging from the fog. None of them looked alive. Their skin appeared gray. Their eyes were completely dark, and every one of them was staring directly at us. The tall shadow carrying the lantern stopped about 50 feet away. The others stopped with it. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then the shadow slowly raised the lantern higher. The yellow light spread across the tracks, and suddenly I saw something hidden beneath the gravel. Bones. Hundreds of bones. Human bones, scattered along both sides of the siding. Some were half buried, others lay exposed, as if the earth had been slowly pushing them back to the surface. Ryan saw them too. His face turned white. This place isn't abandoned. Before I could answer, the lantern light flickered. The figures instantly moved closer. Not by walking, not by running. One moment they were 50 feet away. The next moment they were 20. My heart nearly stopped. That was impossible. No human could move that fast. The lantern flickered again. Now they were only 10 feet away. I could finally see their faces. Every single one looked terrified. Not angry, not violent. Terrified, as if they had died afraid. Then I noticed something even worse. Among them stood Daniel. His uniform was torn. Mud covered his face, and his eyes were locked onto mine. Daniel, I shouted. He opened his mouth, but instead of speaking, dozens of voices came out at once. Different voices, different ages, all speaking together. Leave. The sound echoed through the forest. Leave before it sees you. The lantern suddenly went dark. For 1 second, everything disappeared into complete darkness. Then a deafening scream erupted somewhere deep inside the woods. A scream so loud and unnatural that Ryan dropped his flashlight. And from the darkness beyond the trees, something enormous began moving toward the tracks. The trees began shaking violently. Branches snapped. Leaves exploded into the air. Whatever was moving through the forest was massive, far larger than any animal I had ever seen. Ryan grabbed my shoulder. Mason, run. That was all the motivation I needed. We turned and sprinted toward the locomotive. Behind us, the figures remained frozen in place. None of them followed. Instead, they simply watched, as if they knew something worse was coming. The ground started trembling beneath our feet. A deep rumbling sound echoed through the mountains. Not thunder, not machinery. Something else, something alive. We raced past one freight car after another. The locomotive was finally visible through the fog, only a few hundred feet away. Then the screaming started. Not one scream, hundreds. The entire forest erupted with cries of terror. The figures standing beside the tracks began backing away toward the trees. Even Daniel, even the faceless railroad worker. They looked frightened, terrified of whatever was approaching. Then I saw it. A shape larger than a freight car moved through the fog. Its outline constantly shifted. 1 second it looked human. The next second it looked like a twisted mass of shadows. It had no clear form, no face, no eyes, only darkness, pure darkness. The lantern-bearing figure immediately dropped to its knees. Every other figure did the same, as if they were bowing before it. Ryan and I finally reached the locomotive. We climbed inside and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely start moving the train. The controls suddenly came back to life. The dead screens lit up. The gauges activated, and directly ahead of us, the signal on the main line turned green. Without hesitation, I pushed the throttle forward. The locomotive lurched ahead. The train slowly began moving, faster, faster, faster. As we left the siding behind, I looked through the side window one last time. The giant shadow stood motionless among the trees, watching us leave. Then, just before the fog swallowed everything, I saw hundreds of figures standing around it, including Daniel, still staring directly at the train, as if he knew he wasn't coming back. By sunrise, Ryan and I had reached the next rail yard. Neither of us said much during the trip. Neither of us wanted to talk about what we had seen. When railroad officials met us, we immediately reported Daniel missing. A full search operation began that same morning. Police officers, railroad investigators, search dogs, everyone searched the area where the sighting was supposed to be, but they found nothing. No abandoned track, no Hollow Creek sighting, no footprints, no caboose, nothing. According to every map and every GPS record, the location we described did not exist. The investigators believed we had become disoriented during the night. They blamed stress, fatigue, poor visibility, anything except the truth. 3 days later, they officially listed Daniel Brooks as missing. His body was never found. Months passed. Ryan eventually left the railroad industry. He never spoke about that night again. I stayed, at least for a while, but things never felt normal afterward. Every time I entered a remote section of track after dark, I felt like something was watching, waiting, remembering. Then, nearly a year later, something happened that convinced me the nightmare had never truly ended. I was cleaning my locker before a shift when I found an old photograph lying inside. I had never seen it before. The photo was black and white, very old, at least 50 years old. It showed a group of railroad workers standing beside a freight train. Most were smiling, some were waving, but one person stood near the back, a young conductor, covered in dirt, wearing a railroad uniform. My blood turned to ice, because I recognized him instantly. It was Daniel, not someone who looked like him. Daniel, the exact same face, the exact same uniform, the exact same age. On the back of the photograph, someone had written a single sentence: "The train stops here forever." I reported the photograph to management. The next day it vanished. No record, no evidence, nothing. Even now, years later, I still work around trains. But there is one rule I never break. If a radio transmission comes from a station that shouldn't exist, I do not answer. And if dispatch ever tells me to stop at Hollow Creek sighting again, I will keep driving, no matter what happens, because some tracks were never meant to be found, and some passengers never leave the train. That's the story. If you enjoyed this horror story and have a strange, unexplained, or paranormal experience of your own, feel free to send it to my email. Your story could be featured in a future video. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.